Stephen Colbert has signed off from The Late Show, CBS cancelling the programme in what it says was a purely financial decision, and the programme bowed out with an all-star cast.
On May 21st, 2026, Stephen Colbert took his final bow at the Ed Sullivan Theatre. 9 years at the top of the late-night ratings. An Emmy Award. Millions of loyal viewers who tuned in night after night. Yet CBS, the network that owned his show, decided to end it all. The official explanation was straightforward: financial troubles. The network claimed the show was hemorrhaging money and that the decision had nothing to do with content, politics, or anything controversial. But if you look at the calendar, if you examine the sequence of events that led to this moment, you begin to understand that the real story is far more complicated and far more revealing about the state of media in America today. The timeline is crucial. On July 2nd, 2025, Paramount, the parent company of CBS, reached a settlement with Donald Trump over a legal dispute. The lawsuit stemmed from a controversial 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris that had been edited in a way Trump's legal team claimed was misleading. The settlement amount was substantial: $16 million. This wasn't a minor legal payout. This was a significant check written at a critical moment. Paramount was in the midst of a major merger with Skydance, a deal that required approval from the FCC. The Trump administration would have influence over that approval process. Critics argued that paying a large sum to Trump while simultaneously needing his administration's blessing on a major corporate merger looked like something other than a coincidence. 12 days later, on July 14, 2025, Stephen Colbert opened his monologue and called the situation exactly what he thought it was. He didn't use coded language or vague references. He called the payment to Trump what millions of Americans were already thinking: a bribe. He said it plainly, on live television, to millions of viewers. It was the kind of direct statement that stops networks in their tracks. It was the kind of commentary that makes powerful people uncomfortable. It was the kind of moment that defines late-night television at its best. A host willing to speak truth even when it might cost him something. 3 days later, on July 17th, CBS announced the cancellation. The network released an official statement claiming the decision was purely a financial decision that was not related in any way to the show's performance, content, or other matters happening at Paramount. They wanted the world to believe that this was simply a business calculation. The timing, they suggested, was just coincidence. But coincidences have a way of revealing patterns when you look closely enough. Several prominent figures refused to accept the network's explanation. Senator Elizabeth Warren publicly questioned whether the show had been canceled for political reasons. Trump himself celebrated on Truth Social, saying he loved that Colbert had been fired. These reactions alone suggested that something deeper was at play. Colbert responded on air by reading Trump's post, pausing for effect, and then delivering a response that became one of the most quoted moments of the entire year. He essentially told Trump exactly where he could go, censoring himself only slightly for broadcast television. It was defiant. It was characteristic of everything Colbert had done for 11 years on that stage. Yet the network's financial argument deserves scrutiny. Colbert's Late Show was the highest-rated late-night program in America for 9 consecutive years. This wasn't a declining show in its death throes. This was a dominant force in television. In the key demographic that advertisers cared about most, adults 18 to 49, Colbert had been beating The Tonight Show since 2019. Just days before the cancellation was announced, the show pulled 4.1 million viewers for a reunion episode. That was the largest weeknight audience the show had generated in years. These were strong numbers in an era when television viewership was declining across the board. Additionally, just 2 months after the cancellation announcement, Colbert won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Talk Series. This was a historic win. For the first time ever, a broadcast late-night show had won this particular Emmy category. It wasn't a minor recognition. It was validation from the television industry itself that Colbert's work was exceptional. Yet CBS wanted everyone to believe they were canceling an Emmy-winning 9-time #1 show because it was losing money. The network cited a $40 million annual loss as their justification. But industry experts challenged this narrative. Jimmy Kimmel, who works in the same world and understands the economics intimately, called the $40 million figure beyond nonsensical. He pointed out that CBS was deliberately ignoring affiliate fees, payments from local television stations that carry the show. These fees represented significant revenue that should have been factored into any honest financial analysis. Jon Stewart, who has spent decades in late-night television and understands the business better than almost anyone, dismissed the smoking gun theory. He didn't think you'd find the real answer in leaked emails or secret phone calls. Instead, he pointed to what he called the fear and pre-compliance that had gripped American institutions at that moment. This was about something systemic, something that went beyond one show. David Letterman, the man who built the Late Show franchise from nothing, and who had hosted from the very same theater for 33 years, refused to accept CBS's explanation. In an interview with the New York Times, Letterman didn't mince words. He called the network executives lying weasels. He said it plainly and without hesitation. This wasn't a casual comment. This was a legendary broadcaster calling out what he saw as dishonesty at the highest levels of his former employer. Letterman showed up for one of Colbert's final episodes, and in a segment that mixed comedy with barely concealed rage, threw furniture off the roof of the Ed Sullivan Theatre onto a giant CBS logo below. It was cathartic television. At the end, Letterman looked directly into the camera and essentially told CBS where they could go, using a phrase I cannot repeat here. What happened next revealed CBS's true priorities. The network didn't invest in a new late-night show. They didn't develop something that could compete in the market. Instead, they handed the time slot to Byron Allen and his syndicated program, Comics Unleashed. Byron Allen is a successful entrepreneur who built Allen Media Group into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. He's respected in his field. But here's what's important about this decision. Allen isn't an employee of CBS. He's not under contract to the network. Instead, he buys the time slot from CBS and sells his own advertisements. The network doesn't spend a single dollar on production. According to industry reports, this arrangement saves CBS more than $150 million annually. In other words, CBS didn't cancel Colbert because his show was expensive and failing. CBS canceled him because doing nothing, or rather leasing the time slot to someone else, was cheaper than continuing to produce excellent television. This reveals the real reason behind the cancellation. It wasn't truly about finances in the way CBS presented it. It was about a fundamental shift in what large media corporations are willing to invest in. Creating a nightly talk show requires serious resources. You need talented writers, producers, crew members, and technical staff. You need a host who can carry the weight of that responsibility. You need to build an institution. Colbert had done all of that. He had created something that mattered, something that won Emmys, something that millions of people cared about. But CBS had decided that maintaining that level of excellence was less important than reducing costs to shareholders. This decision also occurred against the backdrop of Colbert's monologue calling out what many saw as corporate malfeasance. Whether that directly caused the cancellation or simply provided convenient cover for a decision that was already being considered, the sequence of events matters. It created an appearance of retaliation. It created the impression that speaking truth on television, that criticizing powerful people and powerful institutions, had consequences. And in an era when media consolidation has concentrated power in fewer hands, that impression is dangerous. The human cost of this decision was substantial. Colbert's staff, over 200 people who had built careers at The Late Show, all lost their jobs the day after the finale. These weren't executives or highly paid talent. Many were hardworking crew members, researchers, and support staff who depended on those jobs to support their families. Nobody was getting paid past that final night. The theater itself, the Ed Sullivan Theatre, with its 100-year history of hosting transformative moments in American entertainment, was left without an announced tenant. The Beatles made their American debut in that space. Elvis Presley performed there. Ed Sullivan hosted his legendary variety show from that stage. David Letterman had made it the home of late-night television. And now it sat empty. When CBS announced that Colbert's colleagues would gather to say goodbye, with Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel actually preempting their own shows to be in the audience, it underscored what was being lost. Never before in the history of late-night television had two competing hosts sacrificed their own airtime to witness a colleague's final episode. It was a gesture of respect for someone who had earned it through years of excellence and integrity. Colbert himself reflected on the emotional toll of the experience. He revealed that before taking the Late Show job in 2015, he had gone through 4 months of therapy just to manage the anxiety of following David Letterman into that role. 11 years later, he said that doing the show every night required enormous reserves of emotional energy. He suggested that perhaps the cancellation, as painful as it was, might actually save his life. This admission humanized the situation in a way that the corporate statements never could. This wasn't just about ratings or money. It was about a person who had invested everything into a nightly institution and had then been told, without his choice in the matter, that it was over. The deeper story here isn't primarily about Stephen Colbert or even about late-night television specifically. It's about what happens to journalism and critical voices when they become too expensive for large corporations to maintain. It's about the difference between making something profitable and making something important. In 2026, it turned out that a major broadcaster had decided that important wasn't worth the cost if it meant irritating powerful political figures or requiring sustained investment in quality programming. The last show ended not with Colbert choosing his own ending, as he had done with the Colbert Report, but with the network choosing it for him. The finale included performances by Paul McCartney and other musical guests, a celebration of the show's history, and tributes from his peers in late night. It was a goodbye tinged with sadness, because everyone in that theater understood that something significant was being lost, something that couldn't easily be replaced. 3 days before Colbert walked off that stage for the last time, he had called out what he saw as corruption. 3 days later, his show was canceled. CBS claimed it was about money. The calendar suggested it was about something else entirely, about the price of speaking truth, about the cost of challenging power, and about a corporate media landscape increasingly unwilling to pay that price. Whether you believe the timeline is coincidental or not, the end result is the same. One of television's greatest hosts was gone, and America lost a voice that had spent 11 years staring down power and making people laugh before they went to sleep. Like, subscribe, and follow for more.